What's up YouTube, and welcome back to Homebrew Subaru. This is going to be my Christmas episode. What's up everyone? So I just first of all wanted to wish everyone a Merry Christmas because I'm likely not going to have a video up before Christmas Day. This is not really a Christmas video, it's just another kind of video. Anyway, if you kind of looked at the thumbnail and the title, you kind of gathered what I'm going to be doing. I'm in theory doing a rear sway bar upgrade on the RS. These parts aren't really upgrade parts. Well, I guess two of them are, but we're going to go over the parts and the preparation work that I had to do to get them to where they are, and then I will be backing in the car, putting up on some ramps and trying to install these parts. So this red sway bar that you see in front of you is actually off a 1999 Legacy Outback. The reason that I have that sway bar is because it is a 17 mil sway bar, and on the Outbacks that's what they had to upgrade the suspension. Now, having it on my older Impreza, which only had the, I believe, 13 or 14 mil sway bar, this made quite a bit of difference on the car. Well, I've noticed on the RS, it also has the 13 or 14 millimeter sway bar, so I decided to hold on to this 17 mil and eventually install it someday. Now, this thing was heavily rusted. I have cleaned it up once before, but over the years it really rusted up quite a bit, and took it right back down to bare metal, and then basically hung it in the middle of the garage and sprayed it with some primer and then a couple coats of the red, which I know it's kind of like, you know, red sway bar. It's not even like a real upgraded sway bar, but anyway, clear coat after that. And so I mean, it took a lot of work to get the rust off and get it all painted, but at least it's done. It's ready to install. Now, as for the bushings and end links, I've had a friend in the past give me these white line end links, and they were barely used. He took them off his WRX when he sold the car, and then he just basically gave them to me. He also had the brackets for the bushings, like the actual vehicle body brackets. They're heavy upgrades compared to what's on the car, but they were obviously never installed because I don't want to buy white line bushings or trying to source them for a 17 mil bar, because these were basically ordered for a 20 mil bar. I found in 05 WRX went back to 17 mil rear sway bar, so I ordered some rear sway bar bushings for an 05 WRX, and I could tell they were going to fit the bar good, and then I could tell they were going to fit these collars as well. So I had to trim up the collars and just take the edges off of them a little bit, and then once I freed up the edges, the bushings sat right inside of them really nicely. On top of all that, I went ahead and kind of figured out what I needed for hardware. So I just went to the hardware store, picked out all stainless bolts, so I can bolt everything up with stainless. Kind of expecting the sway bar to eventually rust, but if I put everything on like this, I'll be happy. Another thing is, it's possible these brackets may need to be welded to the car. The bolts that are holding the factory brackets on are extremely rotten, and I'm not so sure I'm going to be able to get them off, so I might actually have to cut them off and then clean up the area so that I can possibly weld these brackets in place. But until I get the old stuff off and get a better idea, that's kind of what I have planned. So I've already got the car rolled up on some ramps. We'll just kind of get a look to see what we're dealing with here. And yeah, it's not pretty. So these bolts holding the The bushing brackets are extremely rotten. Probably be difficult to get out. These brackets, both the actual bushing bracket and the bracket to the body, both quite rotten. The body isn't actually very rotted at all. This is all just kind of surface stuff, and most of it's dirt. There's still actually plenty of red paint everywhere. So to get this apart, I'm gonna have to try and get these bolts out, this one and the one ahead of it, just so this whole bracket will drop off. I don't have to bother with these because basically I'm scrapping all this so they can just come out with. And then the end links, they can basically just stay on the sway bar, but I have to disconnect them from the lateral link. So not too big of a deal over on this side. But over on this side, end link quite easy to deal with, but as you can see, a bunch of the evap stuff, like from the evap canister hoses and the electrical, all of it's kind of going up through there. So I've kind of got to dig a lot of this out. I'm gonna have to remove the canister, try and get a better idea of, once I have this out of there, what I'm gonna do. So I'm gonna start doing that. I've got some really rotted stuff over on this end to get the canister out. There's another bolt back here, and then once I have that box out, I should be able to see this side a little bit better to see what I'm dealing with, and then I'll show you what I'm planning on doing anyway. So I've really had to change up my plan of attack to get this right side apart. I've had to pretty much put the car back up on jack stands and get rid of the ramps. I had to get this right rear wheel off in order to get, put the light on here, in order to get the filler pipe at least loose so that I could get the bolt out of the bracket. Now I see that the filler pipe's, you know, as rusty and rotten as it is, it's a little worse up there. And if I had one, then I obviously would be putting it in. So that's going to be a future job. I know I can get those, and I have done one before. I was going to take it down and start cleaning it up, but there's just no sense. I'm just going to end up getting a new one and putting it back in. But being able to move the filler pipe far enough ahead, I was able to get the entire bracket off. The bolts did come out, just kind of beat the socket on them and then hit them with an impact. There's a little bit of rust up in here. I'm going to try and clean up a lot of it. I did actually look, and I do have some new bolts to put in. They're M8 by 1.25 thread, and I happen to have some. They're not stainless, which I wish I had, but the threads look really nice and clean up in there, and actually underneath the, like where the bracket was, it's really clean. So I'm going to clean up everything as best I can, and then put a lot of anti-seize on those bolts, and then probably spray everything, sugar coat it with that rubberized undercoating I like to use, and then I should be able to start putting everything back together. So as long as I get to the point where the brackets are kind of ready to go back on, then I'll turn the camera on and we'll start filming the install. There is this little tube bracket for the canister vent, kind of vents up in here in the body. So I've got a, here it is right here. You can see it's like heavily corroded and filthy. It's actually got some dirt inside of it. So I'm going to trim this part of it off and then clean up a lot of the rust and try and reuse it, I guess. And yeah, so I'll come back when we're getting ready to bolt these guys on and start putting up the new sway bar. Okay, I think we are ready for action. I've got this bracket all cleaned up and painted. I've taken the tap and run it down the holes with the threads because a little bit of weld splatter and the powder coating was on the threads. These have never been used, so the bolts weren't passing through very easily by hand, so I just chased the threads a little bit. And I've also painted up in here, cleaned it up and painted on both sides. Ready to start putting these guys up with the new bolts that I have. So it should sit something like that. And after I get these guys bolted in place, then I'll probably run the bar through and get ready to fasten up with the bushings. The exhaust needed to be dropped, so I've let these 3 hangers on the muffler down so I can get the old sway bar out, and I'll have to get the new sway bar in that way. And yeah, so I'm just going to start putting up those brackets, and then we'll come back and kind of see what they look like with the bar going up. Okay, so I've got the brackets all bolted up, and I've kind of laid the sway bar in place. It's just sitting on top of the exhaust, just resting there for now. I have the bushings on, and I have the collars on as well. For some reason, I don't know why, but the holes on the bracket are a little bit offset, and so there's going to be a little bit of a torque to the clasp, or the bracket that holds the bushing. And I don't know if it's going to affect anything or wear them out prematurely. But in order for me to get these to kind of go up and into place, I think that I'm probably going to have to just wrestle with it and get the bolts to line up and tighten them up. Then once the brackets are all tightened up properly, then I can move on to the end links. But so far, so good. Going to be using the stainless 3/8 bolts. That's what these brackets are. They're just basic national coarse thread 3/8 nuts that are welded onto those brackets. So I got some stainless 3/8 nuts to go back in. And I've got the bar all installed. The brackets didn't line up like I said. They were kind of offset, but just applying a lot of pressure and kind of playing around with bolts, trying to line up the holes and get the threads to start. I've got everything in and tightened up both sides, and the bar moves nice and freely. I've got a lot of lube on the inside of the bushing. Remember, these are the 2005 WRX bushings with a 99 Legacy Outback sway bar, so that's kind of how it's gone together. And of course we're using the white line hardware, right? So now I'm ready to move on and install the end links and get them to fasten up onto the bar and try and get them to attach to the lateral links. Now, in order to do that, I may actually put the wheel back on, get all that back together, roll the car out, roll it back up onto ramps, just to make this a little easier to line up. But I think these will go together when the suspension's jacked. You should tighten them up when the vehicle's on the ground. But I've got a feeling these collars will turn anyway. So I'm just going to see what happens. I'm going to try and tighten everything up, and then we'll see how everything looks. And with a bit of cursing and swearing, I've got everything together. Did roll the car out and put it back up onto the ramps, just so I could make it really easy to tighten everything up. I've gotten both sides all done. I have not put the canister back in yet. Not going to bother showing you guys that. Going to have to try and rig up some zip ties or something to get it all fastened back up into place properly. The check engine light did come on because I've got some stuff unplugged, but I can clear the light no problem. But there it is. So to be perfectly honest, that was a little bit more time than I thought I was going to spend. And I even thought I was going to have to weld those brackets on. It's just, you know, I had to take down the canister, loosen up the filler pipe so I could unbolt the bracket. Fortunately, they did unbolt, and I was able to bolt up the new ones. If you're planning to do something like this, it's going to take you some time if you're dealing with a lot of rust like I am. Southern cars, those brackets probably don't rust as bad, but I'm sure the majority of places they just start to rust, and the hardware rusts, and you start breaking stuff, and then you're cutting. But I'm glad I got it all together. I kind of had it somewhat planned, and I'm you know, used all the stainless hardware, so even if I have to disconnect something to take it apart later, should come apart relatively easy. And yeah, it's not a superior upgrade or anything, but you know, it's gonna keep the car a little bit flatter in the rear, and it literally didn't cost me anything. I've had that rear sway bar forever. I bought a used car basically for the engine, and I found out the rear sway bar would bolt onto my old Impreza, or one of my old Imprezas. So it went onto that car, and then the next Impreza, and now it's onto this one. So that sway bar has been on 4 Subarus, and it's still going. Just kind of shows you the mix match of parts that you can still do. It's off a Legacy, it's on a Impreza. But anyway, yeah, from the sway bar to the bushings, that little bit of paint that I used, my friend gave me the end links and the brackets. I might have spent like $25 doing this. So yeah, to me, it's definitely worth doing. I can't wait to kind of give it a drive and see what it feels like. I know it wasn't much of a how-to video, but at least you got to see kind of what I had to do. I will plan to do that filler pipe in the future some point. If you like this video, definitely give it a thumbs up, and if you're new here and you haven't already, please consider hitting that subscribe button for me. Leave your questions and comments further down below, and I'll see you in the next one.